Hi everyone, this video is continuing on about the Middle Ages, and this video is going to look at one of the elements of medieval society that greatly contributed to the Middle Ages being the Dark Ages, and that is medieval religion and the medieval church. This is History with Zara Anderson, and this video is going to focus on the medieval church. So the medieval times were a time when nearly everyone was Christian, and nearly every one of those Christians was in the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church dominated life of everyone, as everyone believed in God and the devil and the consequences if you didn't follow the word of the Lord. They worried about their soul greatly. They spent life trying to show God that they were good because they genuinely believed in the fire and brimstone of hell, and that if they did not show God that they were good, then they would be ending up in hell. One way that people could do this was to join the church as priests, nuns, or monks, and one way which was convenient for the Catholic Church was that wealthy people could give money to build churches and cathedrals to show God that they were good, so they didn't really have to behave that good because they were giving money to the church, and that was one way to show God that they were good. The other ways that people could contribute were knights went on crusades to fight for God, and then others, such as peasants and the lower ranks of society, just tried to follow the laws of God, which conveniently were set by the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church at this time was extremely powerful and was mainly responsible for keeping order within society because they were very powerful. And the way it worked was priests held mass, preached sermons, heard confessions, and told them what God wanted them to do. The head of the church was the Pope, and he was seen to have more power than the king. Basically, the Pope was seen to be the direct line to God, and he knew what God wanted, and then he could disseminate that information out to the rest of the church leaders, who would disseminate it out to the church level, and then the priest would deliver it to the people. One thing that the priest could do was he could excommunicate people from the church, and that they were no longer Catholic and involved with the Catholic Church. This is a terrible consequence for people because they really genuinely believed in the fire and brimstone hell, and that if they were excommunicated from the church, basically they were damned to hell for eternity. So this was a very powerful deterrent to bad behaviour for people. One way that the average Joe could contribute to the church was by joining a monastery. This was for men. So monks would live in a monastery to live a simple life of prayer and work. And what monks would do is they'd take a vow of chastity, and that they'd never have intimate relationships with a woman or a man. And they would take a vow of poverty, and that they'd live their life in poverty and away from material things. And they'd live a life of obedience, so that they would follow all of the orders of those higher above in church and of God. For these people, life was hard. They ate plain food, they wore homemade robes, and many of them operated under a vow of silence, and they worked all day, and then they had a little sleep, and then they got up and did the same thing the next day. So it was a very boring, repetitive life for them that was actually full of heart. So the alternative for women was to join a convent and become a nun, and they would live in the convent. They made 3 vows there: poverty, chastity, and obedience, just like their male counterparts. But the life for female church workers, nuns, was much more positive than perhaps what they would have experienced on the outside of the church. Convents and nunneries were the only place of education for women, and some people were placed in convents by their families, and others, such as women, widows or older women who didn't have the protection of a man, could use a convent as a secure retreat. So for women, joining a convent would actually improve their life for them. Although the church wielded great power over people and probably misused it a lot of the time, that's not the only thing about the church. There were some good aspects of the church. So monks and nuns would help the poor and sick. This wasn't a time of government benefits or anything. If you were poor or if you were sick, you didn't have any way to get treatment. So monks and nuns would help those people who were poor and sick. When most people were illiterate, monasteries were the only source of books and literacy, and an important work that they contributed was that monasteries contributed to beautiful works of art called illuminated manuscripts, an example of which is on the screen now. So although the church wielded great power and probably misused it, they did do some good things as well.